Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. That's Psalms 23:4. The last part of that verse always gets me, that the rod and staff of God are what brings David comfort. It's something that comes to mind whenever I think about discipline, which is the topic of this video. But you don't need to be a Christian to enjoy this video. Don't worry, I'll be talking about discipline at a more conceptual level. Discipline's a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and it's why this video has taken so long for me to write. It's gone through several rewrites at this point, because I really wanted to do it justice. It's something that's heavily characterized the last few years of my life, since about 2021, which I know is not that long of a time in the grand scheme, but I'm only 19 now, and it's really influenced me since I was about 16, give or take. Discipline's something that I've thought about a lot, and I've been consistently meditating on it, both consciously and subconsciously, for several years now. And I've always been, I think, a deeper thinker than most people. And I don't mean that in a prideful or egotistical way at all, no. I just like to spend time thinking about deep ideas that I find important, and that's not for everyone. And most people don't have the framework in their life to even be willing to stop and think. And again, I don't mean that in an egotistical way at all. If anything, I probably overindulge in ideas and don't commit to as much action as I ought to. But I say all this because I think it says something about discipline as a concept for it to have enthralled me so much. So the way we're going to go about it is this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and discipline in my life and how it's shaped me and my thoughts about things, and then we'll dive into it at a more conceptual level. So let's rewind. Freshman year of high school for me. I'm 14, roughly 5'8". I weighed at about 103 pounds. But minus the being underweight, I'm doing pretty well at that point. I'm still struggling with procrastination and getting schoolwork done on time, stuff like that. But I had mostly adjusted to high school at that point. I had transferred from a private Christian school to a public school in 7th grade. And that was a pretty rough adjustment for me, especially since I'm a little more introverted and neurotic. Less so now, but very much so then in middle school, which I think everyone was a little bit neurotic in middle school. It's just kind of that time period in your life. But obviously the change in crowd and values around me was really challenging. It was very much like leaving a bubble and becoming unsheltered in many ways. But by freshman year of high school, I had more or less figured out how to assimilate without compromising my core values. And then came the end of the year, and COVID struck. And yes, I was a freshman when COVID hit. I know I'm a baby, or maybe not. Maybe you're in high school watching this now and you think I'm old. I'm unk. But yeah, COVID hit, and I was sent home to do online work for the last sixth of the year, roughly. And I'd always hated school, more or less. There are some things I like about it, especially in retrospect now. I do enjoy it in many aspects. At the time, I really hated school, but then having to do it online was even worse. And come sophomore year, my fears were realized, and we still weren't back to normal. My school had that year set up so that the school was split into two cohorts of students, two groups of students. They split each grade in half. And each cohort, each group would come into school 2 days a week on opposite days, and then we had to wear masks while we were still in school. And the rest of the days were online classes. And this year was hands down the lowest point in my life. I don't think anything will ever come close to how miserable I was during that time from 2020 to 2021. The lockdowns had effectively killed off a majority of my social group because, they were already on a bit of a shaky foundation just because of my late injection into the public school system and my general introvertedness. So this format kind of wrecked my social life, but it also, I'm to blame for that to some degree, obviously, with being introverted and not being a good Samaritan in maintaining those relationships. But COVID, hurt my social life. But it also really kind of destroyed me on a personal level, or I shouldn't say destroyed, that's a little dramatic, but it exploited my tendency for procrastination. And when school was only twice a week and most work was shifted to be online, school was no longer real. It wasn't tangible the way that it was before. And the immediate consequences of procrastination were gone because I was online half the week. So I had the worst grades I've ever had that year. I was wildly undisciplined. I had no real hobbies. I had few, if any, friends, and I was extremely unhealthy. I just had very much a lack of exercise and good nutrition. And I had no vision for the future, which was pretty alarming because this is the time in high school, sophomore year, where you're starting to put together ideas about what to do after you graduate. So all this to say, I was very depressed, very unhappy. I distinctly remember a number of mornings where I had just so many missing assignments that I just woke up and was miserable. I was like tearing up in the morning, which would be very, that's the only time I think that's ever happened in my life. It's hard for me to really describe this time to you because, well, I probably buried some elements of it in my mind, but also I've just chosen to let go a lot of those things, and I just don't remember. But I barely skated through to the end of the year, barely made it to the end of sophomore year with passing grades. Thank the Lord they had no finals that year because I definitely would have failed them. But I kind of recuperated over the summer, and I had a lot of downtime since I still couldn't drive at that point. I didn't really have any friends close by. Well, that's not entirely true, but I didn't really have that. I only had like one friend that was nearby. So I spent a lot of time alone and a lot of time thinking about what I could have done better. And I decided at some point during that summer that I could not, under any circumstances whatsoever, allow that to happen again, allow any procrastination to that level to tear me apart like that again. And I declared procrastination public enemy number one. So coming into junior year, it's 2021, and I've got a new lease on life, man. I still retained some of the bad habits I had, but I kept my procrastination under wraps. So we're also back to a full normal week of classes, which was no doubt instrumental for me. So then comes about the midpoint of the school year, roughly beginning of December 2021, so right at the end of 2021. I had a thought sort of blossoming, which was something like this. It was something along the lines of, you've done a pretty good job here, and you've left yourself with a good amount of time. And to be honest, playing video games and watching YouTube, it's not that fulfilling. Maybe you could find something else to do at that time. And then the follow-up question was, what aspect of my life could I improve with that time? What could I do? That would be fulfilling and maybe even interesting and fun. And my answer was evident the moment I looked in the mirror. And I decided then I would try to get in shape. And I started doing some basic research on what I ought to be doing. And in the process of that, I started coming across videos of guys doing your motivational type content, your David Goggins kind of characters, and the whole idea of working in the dark, if you will, or putting in work quietly while others are floundering around. That idea mixed with the new drive to get in shape just lit a fire under me, dude. I can't even explain what that time was like. It was a motivational push that I'd never felt in my life before. So I started training calisthenics and some weight training with crazy intensity and consistency, and I would start looking forward to my workouts. Just those are the highlights of my day. I was itching to get out of school to go lift weights. And it took me about 6 more months for that sort of disciplinary infatuation to really reach its peak. My mentality had done a full 180 to the point where I would go out of my way to do things that were difficult just for the sake of their difficulty, not even because they were necessarily valuable and at times even destructive. I was getting up at 5 a.m. to go run and do calisthenics before school, and then I would come home and lift weights after, taking cold showers, all stuff like that. And that 6-month mark is right where the discipline started to seep out of just the exercise part of my life into the rest of my life. I started reading again after several years of not picking up a book. This time more so reading philosophy and nonfiction, stuff I found more fulfilling and interesting. Well, not to say that fiction isn't interesting, of course, but just more practical, I guess. more practical in its application. It takes a more sophisticated reader to be able to get that out of a fiction novel, and also depends on the fiction book as well. I started reading again, started aiming higher with my schoolwork, all that kind of thing, just trying to improve every area of my life. It's crazy to see just how much teaching myself discipline changed my entire life, not just discipline in one category. It just seeped out everywhere. Oh, excuse me. And it wasn't just discipline either that I learned about during this time. It was also potential. I learned a lot about potential, or rather, I learned how much I didn't know about potential. Getting so much better at a single thing taught me that not only did I have an unfathomable amount of potential in me, but so did everyone else. And it made me disappointed to see the actions of some of my friends at the time, because I knew how much they had to give and how much they had to offer to the world. You don't know. I learned that you don't know enough about yourself to be a cynic, and that's something I've really kept in mind since then, I think. Fast forward to now, I'm working on a degree in exercise science, and I'm looking into personal training and nutrition and stuff like that. It's not the most comprehensive vision that I have laid out for myself at the moment, but it is a vision, and that all started from the lessons I learned during that disciplinarian period. I don't train quite like that now, but mostly because I know better and I understand more about working out and things like that. But also because I've integrated discipline into my life on a broader level. And I'm by no means perfect. I still have plenty of wasted time and a tendency for procrastination, but I'm astronomically farther ahead of where I could have been. So I'll take it. And practicing discipline made me more visionary as well. The reason I'm pursuing the direction I am right now is because I realized when I was about 16 how bad the crisis of purpose is in the world. And I knew that teaching people about discipline and responsibility is the antidote to that. Responsibility in particular, but discipline goes along with it. That's something that really our society hasn't really addressed in 60 years, 70 years. That purpose is real, and it should be the central part of your life. Anyway, that's another discussion. We can talk about that another time. So why am I telling you this? Why am I telling this about me? It's a rather personal story. Well, I think it's important that you understand where my thoughts about discipline come from. And now that you know a little bit about my story with discipline, I'll try and tell you what I learned from that and what I pulled from that conceptually. So first of all, let's start basic. What is discipline? And what does it mean to be a disciplined person? How do you get disciplined? Well, what I found is that discipline is essentially self-control, and more specifically, the ability to delay gratification and do things that you don't want to do in order to reach a goal, whatever you're aimed at. And to be disciplined is to be a disciplined person is to be someone who can sacrifice whatever is necessary to reach the goal at hand. You can think about this in the big picture way or the more practical way, but I think an understanding of both is necessary to really wrap your head around discipline. Say I'm trying to lose some weight, and I'm at the gas station to fill up on gas, but I really want to go inside to get a bag of Cheetos, but I've already had my calories for the day. I'm maxed out. So I don't go in to get the Cheetos. That's the simple way to understand discipline. It's choosing to do or not to do something in order for a goal that's right in front of you. All right, where was I? In the big picture, discipline is still the same conceptually, just applied a little bit differently. So let's say, as a goal, I want to die as a fulfilled man. That's my central vision. That's my central purpose that I've laid out, my central aim. I want to live a meaningful, profound, and fulfilled life. And discipline is still just as applicable to that kind of vision, that level, as it is for the more practical, short-term level. And since I've set that out as my goal, it means all of my actions must be catered around that. And in any difficult decision that I have to make in order to serve that aim, to live a fulfilled life, that will require discipline, self-control, and sacrifice. So discipline, in a sense, is also strength of character. It's your ability to withstand all of the temptations and other paths that will appear to you as you pursue your aim or your vision. Now, if you call it strength of character, that implies that you're aimed at something that is actually good and righteous. But discipline can be used to service any end, good or evil, which also brings up the topic of whether or not there are objectively good things that you ought to aim at. But that's a topic for another day that I've already talked to death in other videos. And I'll caution about disciplining correctly in a second when we get there. How do you get disciplined? This part's pretty simple. Sit and think for a moment. Ask yourself, what things should I do that would be helpful and or good, and that I don't want to do because of their difficulty? And then go and do those things, even if they're small. Like waking up 15 minutes early so you have time to eat breakfast in the morning. Just applying that small amount of discipline to make your life just a little bit better. Cleaning your room, doing some exercise, whatever, it doesn't matter. Any activity that is difficult, that you don't want to do, and helps you pursue your goals, even if it's just in a tangential way, it will help you become more disciplined. So, do some reflection on that. And if you're working to become more disciplined, you'll find an answer to that question about what can I do to be more disciplined quickly. If you sit and think on it, you will get an answer. That's for sure. So one of the other things I've learned about discipline is how discipline and motivation play off of each other. This is something I don't see talked about at all, and I think it's actually really important that people understand this. A lot of your Jocko Willink, David Goggins type speakers, who are no doubt masters of discipline, I have a lot of respect for those kind of guys, they tend to talk about motivation as if it's irrelevant and it's something to be ignored in favor of discipline. But I don't think that's quite right. It is true that it's necessary to forego motivation in cases where, like for example, if you're having an off day where you feel a little tired, but you still have a workout to get to, but you have no motivation to do the workout, but you're healthy, you're otherwise well, you're just feeling a little tired, you probably just need to grit your teeth and get through the workout. But that's the wrong mentality to have in the long run. Excuse me. Because the reason it's the wrong mentality to have is because if you never feel any motivation for your goals, then it's time to reorient yourself and aim elsewhere. If your goals are truly meaningful to the highest degree, you will feel motivated a significant portion of the time you spend pursuing those goals. But when even that motivation does inevitably crumble, because it will falter at some point, because one motivation is always competing with 100 others in your mind, discipline carries you the rest of the way. So a balance of both of these forces is necessary, because they are two sides of the same coin. They're how you get from here to there, from here to where you're aimed at. Discipline is just a tool to help you reach what you're motivated to pursue to begin with. And I think it can be easy to elevate discipline to almost godlike status, even if you're especially if you're a naturally conscientious individual. So this is another thing I've learned, and I think it's so important and so slept on. It's 100% too easy to make discipline your God. You see, human perception, and I don't know how many of you know this, or understand it at least, and I'm not trying to sound pretentious by presenting it that way, but human perception has an interesting little quirk in that we see the world only in relationship to our goals, in what we are aimed at. And one way you can understand the concept of a God, lowercase g, is whatever your highest aim is. It functions as your God, whatever your foremost focus is. And I see some guys who really embrace that sort of David Goggins disciplinarian message the wrong way. They take that message about honing discipline and becoming conscientious and working hard and turn it into, I have to run 20 miles a day and study for 16 hours in a row and sleep 4 hours a night and absolutely maximize productivity over everything else, no matter what. And I love the spirit of that. Like, I love the energy. But there are times when that is needed. But if you elevate your discipline to that status, that level, then you miss out on things that really matter. You get so honed on one specific track that you lose sight of the greater good sometimes. You're actually unable to grow because you're limited by the pursuit of shallow aims. So regardless of how hard you work towards them. So let me give you this example to illustrate. Imagine a young guy from rural Appalachia, grows up very poor, but is extremely intelligent, very conscientious, strong, assertive. He starts a business when he's 16, 17, competes in ultra marathons, graduates high school early, starts a couple more businesses, why not? And is like a millionaire by the age of 25. It seems like a great come up story, right? You know, this guy who's from middle of nowhere, grew up poor, is this extremely successful and talented individual. But you don't see what he sacrifices to get there. This guy works so hard on training his body and mind and building his businesses that maybe he grew distant from his family. He prepped too quick for his ultra marathons and put too much stress on his body, and now his body's in shambles by the time he's 25, 30. You know, when maybe one day he gets the call that his mother passed away in a car accident or something along that line, suddenly he realizes that all his effort was for nothing. He has no relationships. He's distanced himself from his family. He's lost his mother now. He has no real religion or philosophy other than, I'm just going to work really hard to get what I want. And you don't want to be that guy. And you don't have to. And his life might seem extravagant from the outside. Might seem like a great story. But on the inside, he's falling apart. He's crumbling. And so we really need to be careful about setting your goals and aims wisely and carefully before you start really putting on the discipline heavy. And you need to make sure you incorporate the things that are most important when you're setting out your goals and your aims. You know, God, family, relationships, and what you have to offer to the world. You need to be wise and careful, and you can pull back your bowstring as hard as you like, but it's all for naught if you're aimed 180 degrees away from the target you ought to be aimed at. So, something to think about. So, on a little bit less depressing note and on a little bit more practical level, I've also learned that discipline needs to be integrated very carefully and consciously when it comes to dealing with exercise and athletics. And this is more my specific area of expertise, and it's involved in what I'm studying anyway. So this part's pretty much relegated for my athletes, my fellow athletes. It can be too easy to favor discipline over your broader health and performance. And I've learned this one the hard way. It's no fun to destroy your legs because you run way more than your body can handle. And even now, I still can't really run, at least not a whole lot, without my shin splints just starting to kill me. You know, I'm being a little bit exaggeratory, but you get the point. So be careful to set up your training in a way that your body can handle, especially if you don't have a coach over your shoulder watching what you're up to. It's great to have a good coach because they'll reel you back in when you're going too hard, and they can help optimize the amount of effort you put in. But for those of us who don't have that, we need to be very careful of how we're training, especially if you're just a guy who's just an absolute dog. You want to go at it as hard as possible. Just be careful, because overtraining is a very real thing, and you don't want to hinder your performance or, God forbid, ruin a successful athletic career maybe, just because you wanted the feeling of being the big dog who's going out there going harder than everybody else. And again, I love that energy. Like, I get it, but it's just not worth it. So just be cautious, be wise. And let's slow down now and try and wrap things up a little bit. I talked about a lot of stuff here. And keep in mind that a lot of the things I was talking about there, as far as your pitfalls in discipline, are really for people who are already pretty hardcore disciplinarians. Most people don't need to be too concerned about being the millionaire example that I gave. Most people just need to learn discipline, which is why a lot of these motivational speakers are so popular. It is absolutely, unequivocally important that you learn to be disciplined. It is how you get from point A to point B, and you will never reach any, and I mean any goal, unless you have some discipline in your life. Your life would be reduced to chasing whatever immediate pleasure pops up in front of you if you don't have discipline. This is why David in Psalms 24 or Psalms 23, excuse me, back in the beginning, explicitly says that he finds comfort in the rod and staff of the Lord. David finds comfort in the guidance and discipline of God, because without it he would be nothing and would have nothing. It's guided him to everything that he has and believes. So go out there, get disciplined, do good, be great, and try to enjoy it, because life is a gift, man. And you've been blessed with such potential, and it would be a shame to see it go to waste over an inability to control yourself. So I hope this video was helpful for you, and I hope you're doing fantastic and you can utilize my words to some degree in your life, and hopefully I haven't wasted your time. I had to go through this video a number of times because this is a concept that my thoughts on discipline are something that have been brewing in my mind for a long time, and I really wanted to do it justice. And I still have more thoughts that I haven't figured out how to fit in here into more specific ways. But yeah, anyway, I also have some different lighting going on today, so hopefully that comes out decent on camera. We'll see. Anyway, enjoy yourself. Have a great day. Hope you're blessed beyond belief. Bye.